Welcome to Bloomberg Technology. I am Emily Chang in San Francisco here with Bloomberg Technology. Stocks surging the most in almost 2 weeks. This on reports the death toll in coronavirus hotspots is showing signs of slowing down. The S&P advancing in late trading, up almost 7%. That said, other hotspots developing. Japan preparing for a resurgence now of the virus. We're going to take you to Washington momentarily. We are standing by for the daily virus task force briefing where President Trump should speak. We are also hearing that President Trump recently spoke with Vice President Joe Biden. Also coming up, we're going to be speaking about the condition of the UK Prime Minister. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has now gone into the ICU. He, as you know, tested positive for the coronavirus 10 days ago. His symptoms have only gotten worse since then. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson, who joins us on the phone now from London. Rosalind, what do we know about the Prime Minister's condition at this late hour?
Well, that's right. As you say, he's been battling the virus for 10 days now, isolating at home in Downing Street with his meals and key documents left outside the door. He was attending meetings via video link and sending these selfie videos out to the public, even though he was clearly ill throughout. What we know is that on Sunday, his condition worsened and he was sent to hospital with a persistent high temperature and a cough. And now he's been transferred to the ICU conscious, but as a precaution, they say, in case he needs ventilation. And of course, that's been a pattern for some virus patients where around the 7 to 10 day mark, they take a turn for the worse, and that happens very quickly. So clearly he's unwell, but right now they're saying that this is the precautionary step.
Right. Rosalind, he did tweet this morning. He said, last night on the advice of my doctor, I went to the hospital for some routine tests as I'm still experiencing coronavirus symptoms. I'm in good spirits and keeping in touch with my team as we work together to fight the virus and keep everyone safe. Meantime, he's told Dominic Raab, the UK Foreign Secretary, to deputize in his absence. What has Raab said? I know we heard a little bit from him just about an hour ago.
Well, that's right. So he's Boris Johnson's de facto deputy, the Foreign Secretary, Raab, stepping in temporarily to oversee things, coming out a short time ago, just saying his focus will remain on the coordination effort to combat the virus here in the UK. Interestingly, of course, Raab, said also that Boris Johnson was in good spirits and so on, but then said he'd not spoken with the Prime Minister since Saturday. So that means no instructions or guidance, even as Raab chaired some key meetings today, and certainly at this point he's now on his own. And this is coming at a time when you're seeing real signs of tension within the government here over how fast to come back out of those containment measures between some of the economic members of the government and those on the health side. So Raab will have quite a task to manage all of that whilst dealing, of course, with the high level of concern within the government and elsewhere about Boris Johnson's health.
Right. How does this development play into the broader questions of how the UK has handled the virus? I know the UK was slower to put shelter-in-place orders into place, certainly long after Italy and Spain saw some of these devastating numbers.
Well, that's right. As you say, there have been questions for weeks about the way the British government chose to respond to this. Boris Johnson, he initially championed a herd mentality approach, which is to not try and contain the virus, but rather to slow it down so that the community has more time to build immunity. And what that has meant is no widespread testing. People were told generally just to stay home if they had symptoms. Of course, eventually the government moved towards a full lockdown, closing schools and businesses and so on, and limiting people being able to go outside. But even so, since then, there's been further criticism that the testing effort has really struggled to take off or be rolled out as quickly as they have said it would, and some signs perhaps of some fairly chaotic management going on within the UK government.
So talk to us about the planning and coordination in place as you know it, or as you understand it, given that the UK has yet to hit peak infections. Obviously now we have the Prime Minister in the ICU. What was the plan going into this for how the UK would handle the next few days and possibly weeks?
Well, that's right. So what they're saying is that they're possibly still somewhere between 7 to 10 days away from really being able to call a peak in the UK. We are seeing some very, very early stage green shoots in terms of the number of new infections, the pace of that, and also the pace of daily fatalities. But like elsewhere, people are saying it's way too soon to say that we're through the worst of it. And so the officials here were saying the next 7 to 10 days are crucial. And through that period, they really promised to ramp up testing significantly on a daily basis. And that's been the real question again, is that so far they're not really hitting those targets, and there are remaining questions about the ability to do that. But certainly the question also is whether the lockdown, which is due to end here in the UK in a week from now, is extended. And it's quite possible they'll keep some measures in place for some weeks further beyond the initial period.
All right. Again, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the ICU after his coronavirus symptoms have worsened. Rosalind Matheson on the phone for us in London. Rosalind, thank you so much for that update. Coming up, we're going to take you to the front lines of DoorDash and speak to Tony Xu, the CEO of DoorDash, exclusively. We'll also take you to Washington and that White House press briefing as soon as it begins. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Going now to DoorDash, the biggest food delivery app in the United States, obviously has been essential at this time with folks sheltered in place, ordering food, ordering now also from convenience stores, which DoorDash just added to the platform. I want to bring in the CEO of DoorDash, Tony Xu, for an exclusive interview. Tony joins us now on the phone. So first of all, Tony, good to have you back. It certainly feels like we're in a horror movie right now that just won't end. And I know you've made a lot of changes to keep operating at this time, to keep food coming to customers, to keep Dashers safe out there on the front lines. Give us just a snapshot of where you are today, what business is like, and what you're doing to keep continued safety measures in place.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Emily. I hope everyone out there is safe and healthy. You know, I would say right now is a time where, certainly starting with local businesses, they're the people that need us the most. You know, I think, first and foremost, while this is a public health crisis, we have to make sure as a country that we do our best to avoid an economic collapse. And I think, recognizing that local businesses are the lifeblood of the economy, getting them sales is really our top priority. And of course, alongside that, we want to make sure that everyone is safe. And so, this is why we're defaulting every delivery to contactless. It's why we were the first platform to ship 1 million units of hand sanitizers and gloves. It's why we added 2 million units of masks that will be coming soon. And, for customers, we're making sure that, everyone can get the essentials that they need while, doing this in a way that supports the most vulnerable populations first.
Now, Tony, I've been trying to order as I can to support local restaurants. And, I can say just as a customer, even though you're doing all of these things, contactless delivery, et cetera, I still bring the food inside and I look at it skeptically, like, should I eat this? Should I feed this to my family? How can you assure me and how can you assure your customers that this is safe?
Well, I think to start, if you look at some of the guidelines that health organizations, whether it's the CDC or the FDA, have published, this is not an illness that's a foodborne illness. This is an illness that transports largely through the air, and there's no evidence found that deliveries are unsafe. I think, secondly, we are, doing all that we can to make sure that this is as safe as possible. So we are defaulting every delivery to no contact, so Dashers will leave them at the door. We are making sure that Dashers are equipped with gloves, hand sanitizers, and soon masks. We're making sure that merchants are following local health guidelines, both social distancing guidelines, as well as making sure that the packaging comes in tamper-proof packages. So I think when you compare this to the alternative of going outside and potentially shopping on your own, this is a fairly safe alternative.
Now, on that note, you recently started delivering from convenience stores, meaning that you can get limited groceries and other essential items as well. I checked earlier today. I could get stuff from 7-Eleven, but I couldn't get anything from like a Safeway, for example. How is this new offering going, and how do you see expanding it? Because people really want really want some other options in terms of grocery delivery, because the current options are overwhelmed.
That's right. So we are working as quickly as we're able to make sure that every business locally can come online and offer delivery. So we've started doing some of this as you experienced yourself. So partnering with almost 2,000 locations that offer convenience items and essentials from places like 7-Eleven, Casey's General Store, Circle K, Wawa. We're starting to also power grocery stores. So we've been longtime partners of Walmart, but we've since added other grocers. For example, more recently, we've added Hy-Vee, Woodman's, and a lot of these grocery deliveries we're actually discounting for free, especially those customers who are coming from the elderly community and other more vulnerable populations.
Now, Amazon has been getting a lot of criticism over the past several days. There are reports that workers in up to 50 different Amazon warehouses have tested positive. There's worker discontent. One worker was fired by the company. They say he was violating quarantine rules. He believes it was retaliation because he was leading worker protests. I'm sure you've been following this. What's your reaction to all of this?
Well, I can't speak to other companies, but what I would say is, the most important thing in this pandemic is to make sure that everyone is safe and that we take all the preventative efforts in doing that. So that's why we distributed the millions of health kits with gloves, sanitizers, and soon coming masks. It's also why we announced just last week a partnership with Doctor on Demand to give telemedicine visits at a very affordable $4 per visit to all Dashers. That way, especially when it's very difficult to get some of these COVID-19 test kits, that they can actually make sure that they're safe and they don't need to be on the road if they don't have to be. We've defaulted every delivery to be no contact, and we've also ensured that for those who do need the opportunity to work, that earnings are high. So Dashers are earning now over $22 per active hour nationally.
Now, you're dealing now with consumers who are financially stressed, restaurants who are financially stressed at a time when people need your service now more than ever. But I assume, it's incredibly difficult right now to keep the business operating as it should be. There has been a lot of M&A chatter about the food delivery space. I know I've asked you this in past shows, but even more recently, it was reported that you looked at a presentation about M&A, and the idea has been floated that perhaps Uber Eats and DoorDash should merge. If given the option, would you sell to a company like Uber?
I think at this point in time, this is a moment much bigger than business. And in terms of where I'm spending all of my time, as you can imagine, it's a pretty energizing yet stressful time for everyone. All of my time is really spent on making sure that we are driving as much business as we can and getting economic relief to merchants, that we're keeping Dashers safe, and we're bringing essentials to local communities and the vulnerable populations that need it the most.
Still, you did recently file paperwork to go public. I know at one point you were considering a direct listing, and the health of the business, your business, ultimately, that's the bottom line. Can you tell us how this has impacted those plans and what it has meant for sort of the financial security of DoorDash in general?
DoorDash has always been a business that's first and foremost made sure that its customers, Dashers, and merchants are taken care of. And I think if we continue to do that, especially in a pronounced, pandemic like we are today, we're going to be fine on all fronts.
All right, Tony Xu, CEO of DoorDash, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking time out of this busy day to join us on the show. Coming up, we're going to be talking to the Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft, how AI and technology can help in the COVID-19 pandemic. He's also out with a new book, and we will take you to that White House press conference as soon as it begins. We are waiting for President Trump now, standing by. We'll be right back. This is Bloomberg. Unable to connect. That is the dilemma facing millions of Americans as so many people are being forced to work and school their children from home, many of them without proper access. I want to bring in the Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft now, Kevin Scott, also out with a new book called Reprogramming the American Dream. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. I want to speak to you more broadly first. We're seeing an unprecedented demand on networks, on the cloud, on services that Microsoft offers with so many people working and schooling their children remotely. What's it been like for you behind the scenes, making sure you can keep the lights on? Have there been any close calls with the networks under so much pressure?
So far, everything's been holding up really well, but it is an unusual time and that we're seeing so much growth coming all at once in some of our core collaboration and communication products that we're building.
Microsoft has a number of efforts ongoing in healthcare, and you oversee a lot of that. How can some of these efforts help in the fight against COVID-19?
Well, one of the things that we've been super fortunate is to have good partnerships with biotech companies in place. So we've done some very interesting work and are doing interesting work with a company called Adaptive Biotechnologies, where we've been working to build up a mapping of the immune system and diseases. So we've already worked with Adaptive to use AI and machine learning to hopefully bring a test to market that will determine whether or not there are COVID-19 antibodies in a sample of blood, which will help us better map out the progression of the virus in the population. We're also doing some really interesting stuff right now using some of the same supercomputing capacity that we have been previously using for training deep neural networks for natural language processing to run molecular simulations to try to identify potential therapies for COVID-19 by better understanding the structure of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein.
Now, time seems to be the most precious resource right now. I mean, how quickly can some of these, actually start working? How quickly will we see the results of some of these very exciting technologies? The problem is we need them now.
Yeah, and I think everybody feels an incredible sense of urgency at the moment. So the encouraging thing is that I don't think we have ever seen as many scientists and doctors come together with their partners in the computing sciences as quickly as we have over the past few weeks to try to figure out how we can all work together to develop therapies and potential vaccines for this terrible disease. So we have a huge number of candidate therapies and potential vaccines coming to trial shortly, but it's very hard, I think, to say, what the timeline might be for when these things are available for use safely with humans.
Now, your new book looks at how rural America is falling behind when it comes to things like broadband, things like educational opportunities. And I'm curious, do you think we come out of this pandemic more or less divided, given that there is a digital divide in America and some folks are going to be left behind?
I hope we will choose this as an opportunity to focus on building some of the critical infrastructure that we all need to have a fully inclusive digital future for everyone. So one of the things that you just mentioned is broadband connectivity, and it's sort of an acute issue right now as more work is moving to work from home scenarios, and as kids are doing some of their schooling from home. So if you don't have an internet connection, you can't work and you can't have your kids go to school, which is just a really, really terrible thing. And we have, even though it shouldn't be this way, we have 25 million people in the United States who have inadequate access to broadband connectivity, 19 million of those people in rural parts of the country. So what I'm hoping that we do on the other side of this is not just have a surge of investment in the biosciences and biotechnology and in AI in a way that will help us have cheap, high-quality, ubiquitous healthcare in the future, but we'll also address some of these basic issues like broadband connectivity that really need to get sorted out before we can have a fully inclusive digital future for everyone.
Now, you go back to your hometown in rural Virginia, a place where, like many places in the United States, you've got workers who live in fear that artificial intelligence is going to take their jobs or make their jobs obsolete. Should they be scared of AI?
I don't think they should. I mean, in fact, when I went back home, as I started writing this book, what you just said was exactly what I was expecting to find. And what I found instead were a group of people who already were incorporating fairly advanced technology in their businesses to be competitive in a global marketplace. And it was just sort of striking to see how inventive and ingenious folks were being at using the best tools that they could possibly get their hands on to create success and opportunity for themselves and their communities. I think when you think about AI, it is a tool. It's an unusually powerful tool, perhaps the most powerful one that human beings have ever invented. But there's no reason whatsoever to believe that folks in these rural communities and in Middle America won't be able to pick these tools up and to use them to create prosperity.
All right, Kevin Scott, Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to a pioneer of CRISPR gene editing technology who's working on new rapid response coronavirus testing. Also, we will take you to the White House. We're standing by for the press conference to start there and to hear from President Trump momentarily. We will be right back. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. We are standing by now for the White House press conference, the daily virus task force briefing. President Trump now saying that will start about 15 minutes from now. This is we're getting new headlines in about the condition of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who went into the ICU at a British hospital earlier today. We're now being told by officials that he's receiving oxygen at the hospital. He is not on a ventilator per se, but is receiving oxygen. We'll continue to track his condition and bring you any updates as we have them. Meantime, President Trump has continually touted a drug called hydroxychloroquine, a drug that is normally used to fight malaria. Trump has called this drug a game changer. However, it has yet to be proven effective. Earlier today, Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Vice Dean Joshua Sharfstein joined Bloomberg Television earlier, spoke with our own Tom Keene and Guy Johnson about this drug. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
When I saw that, I thought, here we go again. This has been more than a century for the FDA, for the Food and Drug Administration, trying to make the case that just because one patient may do well or a couple patients doesn't mean a treatment actually works. The most important thing is to do a good study so you can really understand whether it works, how much it works, in what patient population, at what point of the disease. That's how you get real progress, is to really understand treatment. So, this has been going on around cancer treatments, around other treatments for years, and now we're seeing it again. I certainly support what Dr. Fauci says, which is, You really don't know until you do a study that allows you to figure out whether giving the drug causes a patient to get better.
How do you respond to the demarcation that the President of the United States makes between academics and doctors? Tell us this divide between the theory and the practice of academic medicine, of drug tests, and the application of it in the field, where he urgently wants to take the risk on this malarial cocktail.
Well, I think it's okay when there's no other treatments for doctors to try things. But in the end, doctors want more than just treatments to try. They want treatments that work. Patients deserve evidence, not just hope. And so it's really important to temper, expectations with reality, and to be doing studies and talking about the need for real data. So I think it's okay for doctors to be trying this or trying that. I mean, there are very few tools right now. But on the other hand, that should not detract from the urgent need, and we all should understand that things that we're trying, they may work, they may not work. We're really throwing things at the problem now until we have evidence that tells us what actually works.
Dr. Sharfstein, let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. Good morning, it's Guy in London. Where do you see the greatest progress being made right now in terms of therapies and vaccines to help us deal with this?
Yeah, I think my sense from talking to people is that it's probably not in the medications that the president has been promoting, and I hope that the studies bear out that those have some value. But I think the real progress right now that people are more excited about has to do with the immune therapies, that whether you can use, for example, the antibodies that people who have recovered from the coronavirus have made, take them out of their blood and give them to other people very early or even before they're exposed. And there's studies like that at Johns Hopkins and at other institutions in the United States. There's some promising data that has come out of China, but a lot more evidence is needed there too. So I'm hopeful, because so many people have recovered from the coronavirus, that they can be donors and other people can benefit. That would be a relatively short-term preventive therapy and treatment that could make a big difference. It could also point the way to monoclonal antibodies and other products that might have a meaningful impact in the relatively short term.
Doctor, what is your sense of the accuracy of the models that we're all spending so much time paying attention to in terms of predicting when we are going to see the peak in the number of cases?
I think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about this concept of a peak. And, I think people, for where we are now, there will be a peak. But the only reason it's peaking is because we have shut everything down. So I think some people think when you're on the other side of the peak, it just goes down and we can open everything back up again. But if the reason it's peaking is because we've shut everything down, as soon as we open things back up, it's going to go up. And so we have to use the time that we have, that we're buying, to strengthen our healthcare system, to get more protective equipment to healthcare workers, and to build a stronger public health response. So we have another set of tools besides just shutting everything down.
Joshua Sharfstein there, the Vice Dean of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Of course, Michael Bloomberg, the founder of Bloomberg LP and the parent company of this network, supports Johns Hopkins. Meantime, a 2,500 square foot lab at UC Berkeley has been turned into a facility to run COVID-19 tests. Joining us now on the phone is Jennifer Doudna, one of the co-inventors of the gene editing technology CRISPR, who has more recently been working on rapid response tests for COVID-19. She leads this partnership between UC Berkeley and the Innovative Genomics Institute, which have been the focus of this pop-up testing lab. Jennifer, talk to us a little bit about the testing that you're working on so far, the progress that you've made, and what the findings have been.
Hi, and thanks for including me on the show. So we have a pop-up testing lab for COVID-19 virus here at UC Berkeley and the Innovative Genomics Institute. The reason that we put this lab in place was to address an urgent need that I think many people are aware of, to rapidly test people that have symptoms of this disease, but also ultimately to test asymptomatic folks as well. And we need to be able to test them. We need to be able to report the results quickly. And then we need to ultimately develop ways to track those infections and find out who has been infected and who is now protected from infection because they have antibodies. And so ultimately we want to do serological testing in the future as well.
What are you doing differently than other labs that are returning tests in like 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 weeks?
Well, we have a highly automated system. We were able to get robots into our lab quickly by donations from companies and faculty around the UC Berkeley campus. We have a team of people who are highly trained in how to run these robots and also how to manage the data coming out of the tests. And it's just an operation. It's just been sort of amazing to see this operation come together so quickly with a team of people that, 3 short weeks ago had no idea they would be doing this kind of work, but who recognized that they could lend their experience to this effort.
What is the status of your federal certification? Some labs and folks who've been working on tests have actually had them pulled by the FDA.
Right. So we're running a commercially available test that has an emergency use authorization from the FDA. We also have CLIA certification now for this clinical testing lab, and we're in full compliance with both state and federal requirements. This has taken a massive effort, I have to say, and we're putting in place a very detailed document for how we got regulatory approval for the lab quickly. And we're going to be posting that onto a preprint server shortly so that other institutions that want to do what we've done have a pathway for doing so.
Now, would you warn about some of these other rapid response tests that are hitting the market, or do you think that these are scientists just trying to do something to help and that actually are legitimate, even though they can't get through the sometimes clunky approval process that is involved with the FDA?
Look, I think that, having proper approvals for testing is critical for sure. There's an effort right now, as you know, to ramp up the testing capacity around the country and around the world. And so I certainly applaud those that are stepping up to do this. Ultimately, those tests need to be approved, though, for clinical use.
Why do you think we still lack appropriate testing in the United States? I mean, certainly things are ramping up, but not fast enough.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I learned, I was very surprised to learn that commercial testing laboratories, at least out here in California, where I'm located, have up to a 7-day turnaround for patient samples. And the reason is that many of those labs are running manual operations. They're not automated. And so I think that's one factor. I think it's very interesting that, because of the way that laboratory testing is often done commercially, it's a highly distributed process. It's not really sort of centrally organized. And as a result, each lab is having to implement its own procedure. And I can now vouch personally for the fact that, putting these kinds of procedures in place and ensuring compliance takes a lot of effort. So I think it's just a combination of having this distributed laboratory system that we have here in the United States and the fact that many labs were not able to quickly pivot to an automated pipeline that would enable rapid turnaround.
President Trump there speaking, part of the daily White House briefing, saying his best wishes are with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who remains in the ICU. He also offered the help of U.S. drug companies to the UK and said that he's working with the British government with respect to the Prime Minister's condition. Also thanked Apple for producing face shields and masks as well for healthcare workers. We're going to continue to listen into this, and if you want to continue listening, you can check it out on Live Go on the Bloomberg terminal. We'll be right back with more of Bloomberg Television after this quick break.